Around 6 months ago, I did a video explaining the story for Neowiz Games and Round 8 Studios' 2023 Souls-like title, Lies of P. This game was based around Carlo Collodi's 1883 novel The Adventures of Pinocchio, which is set in Tuscany, Italy, and is about a puppet named Pinocchio and his creator and the man he sees as his father, Geppetto. However, the game is set pretty loosely around this novel. The game's design was based on the Belle Epoque period, which translates as the Beautiful Era, and which took place between 1871 and 1914, and was an era which saw European civilization grow in power. Now, not too long ago, the DLC for this game, titled Overture, dropped, so I wanted to do a video on the complete story of this game, as the DLC answered a few more of the lingering questions that the players had after the credits had rolled, but it did leave a few more questions, but that's fine. So in this video we'll be looking at the plot in its most basic form, base game and the DLC, and then going in depth and unpacking other parts of the story afterwards. Finally, please note that there will be spoilers in this video for Lies of P, but with all that out of the way, let's begin. A puppet named P sits in a chair on an abandoned train carriage in the fictional city of Krat. He hears the voice of a woman who introduces herself as Sophia, telling him that he needs to go to a nearby hotel, the aptly named Hotel Krat. P also finds a light on the floor. Picking it up, it says that Gemini will restart soon. Gemini is to escort P to the hotel. Picking his choice of weapon, P ventures out onto the platform. True to what Sophia said, the streets of Krat are not safe. Progressing through Krat Central Station, it seems that contrary to their design, the puppets are frenzied as a result of a phenomenon known as the puppet frenzy, and will attack anything on sight, and therefore have massacred the population of Krat. Moving through the streets, fighting frenzied puppets and getting close to the hotel, P encounters his first obstacle in the form of the Parade Master, a huge hulking puppet that was built and designed as a way to entertain the crowds, and was built in celebration of something called the Grand Exhibition. More on that later. The Parade Master, like the other puppets, is hostile, and as he's blocking the entrance to the hotel, P battles the puppet and defeats him. Moving on, P approaches Hotel Krat. Now, puppets are not allowed entry to the hotel, so P is asked a simple question. Is he human? If he says that he's a puppet, then he isn't able to gain entry. P can also lie and say he's human, and this is a very important decision that will change the course of P's destiny. P enters the hotel. The hotel itself used to be an ancient castle. The castle was at one point turned into a mental hospital and a rehabilitation facility. It was purchased by a very wealthy woman, was renovated, and then subsequently turned into a hotel. Inside, P meets with Sophia. She tells P that she has searched all over the city of Krat in order to find him. She tells him that although he has questions, Giuseppe Geppetto will have the answers to those questions, but his current whereabouts are unknown, with his last known location being one of the scariest neighborhoods in Krat. P also meets with the others there in the hotel. The owner of the hotel, Antonia, who is coughing in a wheelchair and is very sick, suffering from a mysterious disease called the Petrification Disease, and this disease has already ravaged the city of Krat, killing many. P also meets Antonia's puppet butler Polendina and a weaponsmith named Eugenie, who can provide P with some pretty cool upgrades, which of course will help P battle his way through the streets of Krat. Leaving the hotel, Gemini warns P about a group called the Black Rabbit Brotherhood. Nonetheless, P has made it to the entrance to Elysium Boulevard. Heading through the streets of Elysium Boulevard, which was once bustling with the wealthy people of Krat, P finds more frenzied puppets. Coming to the Alchemist's bridge, P comes across a grisly sight. A puppet has been hung from the bridge, and a notice on it says, "Purge Puppets." Crossing the bridge, P hears a man shouting for Geppetto to come out as he has a lot to answer for. That he knows exactly why the puppet frenzy happened, as Geppetto made the puppets. That he and a group called the Alchemists were scheming together. Seeing P, the man known as the Mad Donkey, is filled with rage and fights him. P defeats the hostile human and saves Geppetto. Geppetto addresses P as son and says he understands why people are annoyed at him. He says that he needs to take care of the frenzied puppets at City Hall and asks for P's help in doing so. Geppetto, meanwhile, will go back to Hotel Krat. Pushing on, P arrives at City Hall and walks inside. He's confronted by the Scrapped Watchman. The Scrapped Watchman is another massive creation, a puppet known as Murphy, who was designed to guard the courtyard but also entertained and was friends with the children of Krat. His friends and the children were killed in the frenzy, and he's there to get revenge on their behalf. Again, this puppet is ferocious, but P manages to defeat him. Heading back to Hotel Krat, P speaks with Geppetto, who has set up a workshop in one of the hotel's upper rooms. He mentions a puppet factory beyond Elysium Boulevard, and there's a man, an inventor, trapped there named Vanini. Geppetto needs P to save Vanini and to shut down the factory. Heading out once again, P heads into the factory, and making his way through it and fighting off more puppets, he comes across a mysterious pair, the Red Fox and the Black Cat, who are a pair of what's called Stalkers. They refer to P as a stalker, and say that him getting there in one piece is impressive. They speak of this benefiting their former client, who was Vanini himself. They wish P luck. P eventually finds Vanini. He's hiding and initially thinks that P is going to kill him. Realizing that P is not hostile, Vanini says that he needs help finding his butler Pulcinella. He says that the Stalkers were meant to be working for him, but they abandoned him and the factory. Pulcinella went to barricade the back door, but has not returned. So P heads for the back door, and he encounters Fuoco, the King's Flame. He's guarding the doorway. He's been the one keeping the factory running and has been creating more puppets. Endless reinforcements, if you will. As you'd imagine, Fuoco uses fire as one of his many forms of offense, but after a tough fight, P takes Fuoco down. After defeating Fuoco, Vanini and Pulcinella are back at Hotel Krat and are safe. P's next task is to head to the St. Frangelico Cathedral to save its Archbishop Andreas, who was instrumental in the cathedral having taken in so many refugees when the puppet frenzy started. P also learns that the puppets are taking orders and are following the Puppet King. With the factory now shut down, P pushes on and leaves the factory through the back doors. After a jaunt through the mine, P comes to a small town called Moonlight Town. P arrives at a cable car and speaks with someone known as the Atoned. She warns him that the cathedral is not the sanctuary it once was, and that people who went up there never returned. Therefore, the cathedral is off limits, forever. She does, however, say that if he wishes to pass, he must confirm his identity. She asks P a simple question. Is he a stalker? If he does nothing, then he must fight the Atoned, and after this he obtains the key for the cable car and is free to ascend. If he answers yes by giving the Stalkers greeting, the Atoned is intrigued, saying that she thought the Stalkers all died in something called the Battle of the Workshop Tower. She then gives him the key to the cable railway. Having ascended, he spots something, a former human, a carcass. There are many and they are very hostile. Fighting his way through the carcasses, P arrives at the cathedral. He speaks with a man named Giangio. He's an alchemist. He was fearful for his life for a moment as he believed that P was from the organization. He explains that he's looking for the legendary gold coin fruit, as he believes it contains the cure for the Petrification Disease, as he has the disease himself. He asks P to let him know if he manages to find it. Fighting through many more carcasses and moving deeper into the cathedral, P sees something in there. He meets Cecile, a nun, who says that she serves the Archbishop, but that she's the only one left, with the others having died from either the Petrification Disease or from the monsters. She asks P to bring her the holy mark from the Archbishop's quarters. P can choose whether or not to help Cecile out. If he does, returning to her, she thanks him, but later on, it seems that she's disappeared. She'd left a confession stating that she'd murdered people in the past, and that she is a monster. P meets a strange fellow too, going by the name of Alidoro the Hound. He's a treasure hunter. He asks if P knows of a safe place, and here P has another choice, whether to lie or to tell the truth. If he tells the truth, Alidoro will make the journey to the safety of Hotel Krat. The weaponsmith, Eugenie, seems to have a close relationship with Alidoro, and she's glad that he's safe. She says that despite having lost most of her memories from her past, she remembers that Alidoro actually saved her life once. Moving on, P enters a large room and encounters the monster that he saw earlier and that he's heard about. This is the mutated form of the Archbishop Andreas, the once highly respected and influential priest. He was so respected that people even thought that he could well have been St. Frangelico himself. They called him the Saint of Krat. This gargantuan grotesque mess of flesh is a tough enemy for sure, but eventually P manages to give the Archbishop his rest and puts him down. After defeating him though, something happens. The Ergo that was laying inside the puppets that P had defeated, the Archbishop, Fuoco, the Parade Master and the Scrapped Watchman, is being extracted and is being collected via a contraption in a large tower. A mysterious man sits there saying the stage is set, and he then starts laughing to himself. Heading back to the hotel and speaking with Vanini, he gives P something he's created called an Ergo wavelength decoder. Created for the purpose of finding error in the puppet's imprint, this device allows him to decipher the Ergo wavelengths of the frenzied puppets, as he wants to work out what's making them so aggressive. P needs to head to the Malum district and leaves the cathedral. In order to get to the Malum district, P must travel via the Path of the Pilgrim. It's a very dangerous path to walk, with many beasts and carcasses blocking the way, including a massively mutated carcass in the slums. But after defeating them all, he comes to a bridge and is addressed by someone inside a fortress. They say that they have an intruder, P, so they send another huge carcass after him. Unfortunately for them, P easily defeats it and heads into the fortress. Inside, he hears the voice again, and this time the person says that a nasty puppet has invaded their territory and for the people in the district to be careful. Walking the streets of the Malum district, P comes into contact with the Red Fox and the Black Cat again. They are, again, impressed by P surviving his battle with Fuoco. They want to team up, and P can choose whether or not to accept. Whatever he chooses, he fights his way through the rain-soaked streets and eventually comes to another large open area. P is confronted by the Black Rabbit Brotherhood. They are wanted due to various crimes such as stealing bodies, and they've taken over the Malum district after the Battle of the Workshop Tower and have been terrorizing and exploiting the neighborhood, offering their protection services from carcasses and puppets. After catching people on their territory or interfering with their business, they throw them in what's called the Liar's Coffin. Fighting them, the only one that really matters is the older brother, and after taking him out, the other Black Rabbits are distraught and decide to walk away but state their desire for revenge at some point in the future. Heading into the town hall, P spots a portrait that looks exactly like himself. Grabbing the portrait, P sees Giangio again. He says that he found the gold coin tree, but that he couldn't pick the fruit off said tree as it has actually burnt his hand. Opening the door, it's revealed that the gold coin tree has been in the grounds of Hotel Krat the entire time. Speaking with Geppetto and giving him the portrait from the town hall, he's taken aback by it, saying that the Black Rabbit Brotherhood has stolen it. Geppetto tells P to go to Rosa Isabel Street, which apparently was the epicenter of the puppet frenzy. P needs to go there and take down the King of Puppets, as then, hopefully, the puppets will become confused and leaderless. Grabbing the key from Antonia, P heads to Rosa Isabel Street. P learns about Adelina Corday, a legendary singer who regularly performed there as the singer in the red dress, as the place was the arts and entertainment district. He later, after fighting through the puppet-filled streets, comes across Adelina's sister Patricia, a stalker who goes by the name The White Lady. She's convinced that Adelina is dead, killed by puppets, and that she needs to avenge her, so P fights her and is forced to kill her. After this, he comes across Julian the Gentleman, who, it appears, was the first person to marry a puppet. P can choose to help Julian by retrieving a wedding ring from his wife Melody's body. Finding her body and returning the item, P has a choice to make, as Julian asks him if puppets are capable of love. He can lie and say that she left him a message saying she loves him, or he can say that puppets are not capable of loving a human. Either way, P presses on, fighting through more frenzied puppets and fighting absolute douchebags such as the Mad Clown Puppet. P gains entry to the Estella Opera House. Fighting his way through the Opera House, P can come across Adelina in her dressing room, hiding and very much alive, but infected with the Petrification Disease. The disease has caused her to lose her voice, and she asks P to find her some fruit. He then returns with an apple, and she confesses that her sister actually had a better voice than her, so she poisoned her. Her locket shows a deep hatred and jealousy towards her sister, with the picture inside the locket appearing to have been slashed. Leaving her to succumb to the disease, P then pushes forward and enters a large set of doors. Something has been set up for P's arrival. It shows an old man who looks remarkably like Geppetto, taking the mechanical heart out of a puppet that looks remarkably like P and walking over to place it inside another puppet. This puppet then stands up and the show ends. A massive puppet drops down and extends a hand to P, but he slaps it away, enraging the massive puppet. With the puppet now turning hostile, P must do battle. This is the King of Puppets, the puppet that all the puppets in Krat have been following. After defeating the King of Puppets, the battle is not yet over, as someone emerges from the machine. This is Romeo, and P must defeat him too. After their fight, he thanks P for giving him freedom. If he heads to Adelina's dressing room again, he'll see that she has succumbed to the Petrification Disease. Heading backstage, P finds Geppetto there waiting for him. He says that now the King of Puppets is dead, the lesser puppets in the puppet frenzy will hopefully die down soon, as they're now leaderless. He says that the Petrification Disease still lingers, and tells P that he needs to go to the Grand Exhibition, as he's heard rumors that the Alchemists there have developed a cure for it. P heads down the Charity House path, and he soon comes to the Lorenzini Arcade, a shopping district, and it's populated by carcasses. Taking out these carcasses, P heads through the arcade, which is full of decay and death, and heading through a perilous wine cellar, P comes out at the exit and is outside the Grand Exhibition. P finds a tram and takes a ride to the next platform. Inside the exhibition's gallery, P must fight through many frenzied robots. He meets a survivor, Belle, who mentions people at the Grand Exhibition having taken a drug. She also talks of biological experiments too. Pushing further through the exhibition, P finds vats containing a strange liquid, potentially the drug that Belle was referring to. He is also attacked by strange individuals with guns. A bit further on, after defeating a gargantuan enemy, P comes face to face with Champion Victor, a boxer who had been brought back to life by the Alchemists. This Hercules of Krat is talking of evolution becoming real. Defeating him at first sees him pumped full of the drug, and P defeats him again during his second phase. Before P is able to finish Victor off though, he is finished off by an individual clad head to toe in armor. P then sees the mysterious man who is extracting and collecting Ergo from enemies P had defeated. He applauds P. His name is Simon Manus, and he's the leader of the Alchemists. He tells P that Ergo is a crystallized form of human life essence. Souls, basically, and it being human essence is why it works so well with puppets. He mentions an elixir, the drug that P has been seeing throughout the exhibition and that Belle referred to. He goes on to invite P to a place called the Isle of the Alchemists and witness their triumph for himself. After Simon leaves, P heads for a tram and speaks with the Red Fox and the Black Cat again. Red Fox says they're in a bind. It turns out that Black Cat has the Petrification Disease and is losing his sight. He needs to find gold coin fruit. That gets him from the Alchemists, as they're working for them, but never enough to actually cure him. A way to effectively keep these two in their employ. So P can choose whether or not to help these two tricksters out by giving them some gold coin fruit, or to deny them. Either way, he moves on, and speaking with Vanini, P learns that in order to get to the Isle of Alchemists, their secret island, P will need a special fuel source, a golden Ergo, in order to power a special vehicle that Vanini designed. P gets on the tram. The tram takes him to a place called the Barren Swamp, a former coal mine that is now essentially a dumping ground for discarded and worthless puppets that have outlived their usefulness. And this is where the golden Ergo will be located. He fights various puppets, dodging discarded remnants, and he also meets Alidoro there. He says that he is there as a terrible monster lives on the cliff at the end of the swamp. It behaves like a crow gathering shiny things. Maybe this is where P will find a golden Ergo. Further into the barren swamp, P can come across a human survivor. This is the Owl Doctor, who was the lover of Adelina Corday. He is extremely hostile to P, and after a fight, he is put to rest. Moving on again and making his way through a ravine which is populated by carcasses, P manages to reach the cliffs. He feels the ground shaking and genuinely states that it came from the direction of Krat Central Station. P meets a rookie explorer named Hugo. He mentions Alidoro by name and mentions that he's a fan. He tried to follow Alidoro's tracks but hit a dead end. He speaks of certain rumours about Alidoro, about fraud, theft and assault, but Hugo attributes them to jealousy. Apparently though, Alidoro is wanted. He says that Alidoro saved loads of lives in the workshop tower collapse. He then finds a journal, a sentry's notebook. He was sent out to deal with the monster in the swamp, but didn't realise just how big it actually was, so he reported it. However, his team was denied backup. The sentry mentions that the monster knew that they were there. Entering a clearing, P comes face to face with the aforementioned monster. In line with what the sentry wrote, the monster is huge and grotesque. It's so big because it's been feeding on Ergo from the discarded puppets in the swamp. Its nest is littered with Ergo-depleted puppets. The creature is ferocious, and after a long battle which becomes tougher as it rages on, the green monster of the swamp merges with what could be the now discarded body of the scrapped watchman. P eventually defeats the disgusting creature and retrieves the golden Ergo. Alidoro is there waiting for him. He says that P acted as the perfect bait for him to be able to grab the last hero's weapon. It gives P a nickname, Alidoro's best bait, and Alidoro then returns to Hotel Krat. Anyway, P has a job to do, so he pushes forward and a series of tunnels take him back to where this all started, Krat Central Station. Returning to Vanini with the golden Ergo, he is delighted and says that the Alchemists ordered Vanini to design transportation for them to be powered by the golden Ergo, and that he thinks it will be in their underground base. The problem is that Vanini doesn't actually know where their base is. He tells P that Antonia may know where it is, and he gives him a golden lead acid battery which he can use to power the transportation. Speaking with Antonia, she says that the passage connected to the underground base is actually right underneath the hotel, and it's precisely where Ergo was first discovered. Unfortunately, the passage is locked until someone from their side opens it. Finally, Antonia says that she has heard some of the alchemists occupy the collapsed tower of the train station. Going to the station, P hears Sophia's voice over the Ergo waves and says that what's happening there at the station is an Ergo amplification effect. Asking him to find out what's happening, he fights his way through the station. In the workshop train where he woke up, P can find a letter written by Simon, addressed to him, telling him that he is able to read someone's memories through the Ergo. He talks of a relic being returned to their sacred place and the doors will now open. He finishes the letter by calling P a good guide. Emerging from the station, carcasses roam the streets of Krat now. P has to fight puppets that have been corrupted too. He then arrives at the collapsed workshop tower. Fighting his way up the tower, defeating various enemies, P makes it to the top and is confronted by the Walker of Illusions. This enemy is tough and creates a duplicate of himself, an illusion. Despite this challenge, P prevails and defeats the Walker of Illusions. Descending in an elevator, it shakes from another earthquake. He hears the voice of Sophia telling him that the hotel is under attack. He also hears the voice of Simon too. He says that Geppetto's lies will be useless in the new world. In order to get back to the hotel, as the Stargazer isn't working, P must do battle with the Parade Master again, only this time he's corrupted and he's got friends. Defeating him again, P arrives at the hotel. The place has been ransacked and the mark of the Black Rabbit Brotherhood is clear as day. The Stalkers have kidnapped Geppetto. She says that although the Black Rabbits did it, she senses that this is the work of Simon. Checking on everyone on the second floor, it seems that Geppetto was all that they were after. Antonia, revealing that she had lied beforehand, says that by playing a special chord on the piano, the portrait for the secret passageway will open. Before leaving, Eugenie said that Alidoro disappeared during the attack on the hotel. P then opens up the secret passageway. P is now in the relic of Trismegistus, which may sound like an item but is actually a location. Ergo stalactites hang and protrude from the walls of the cave. Encased inside a mineral known as Crowd, P makes his way through it, through the combat grounds and into another large open area where he is confronted once again by the Black Rabbit Brotherhood. After fighting against and kicking the asses of the remaining 3 siblings, a surprise is in store for P. It seems that thanks to the Alchemists, they've resurrected their older brother who is even more powerful than before. But after another tense battle, P defeats the Black Rabbit Brotherhood for good this time. Speaking with Vanini back at the hotel, he says that thanks to the Ergo wavelength decoder that he gave to P, the puppets, as well as being compelled by the Grand Covenant, were communicating with each other via the wavelengths. Vanini is surprised and excited as they were not built with that kind of intelligence. He deciphered one of the wavelengths but found considerable noise in the signal, and this is what he'd heard.
Carlo, I hope you can hear me. The laws of the Grand Covenant bind us. We're his puppets. First law, all puppets must obey their creator's commands. Law 0, the creator's name is Geppetto. Giuseppe Geppetto.
Vanini then says that they need to find Geppetto, and with that bombshell, P carries on through the area and comes face to face with Alidoro again, who is cowering in fear. He tells him that the Red Fox and the Black Cat have got Geppetto, and they took a submarine going to the Alchemist's Isle. Asking why he betrayed the hotel, he says that the Alchemists told him they'd help him escape from the city. He talks about someone who is annoying, and he's talking about Eugenie. He then drops a bombshell confession and says that he's not really the famous Alidoro. He's Alidoro's partner, well, former partner. He killed Alidoro in an argument. We'll go into this a bit later, but this guy is called Parrot. Choosing to either kill or spare Parrot, P moves on and calls up the submarine. Arriving at Alchemist's Isle, he sees Sophia there, and she reveals that the Sophia he's been speaking with at the hotel isn't the real her, nor is this one. It's just a projection. She's actually located at the upper part of the Abbey. She says that she became Simon's tool a long time ago and has endured a lot of pain. Her goal was not for P to save Krat, but to save her. She wants P to grant her freedom, death, in order for her body and her spirit, separated for a long time, to reunite in peace. Moving up the beach, P sees someone else's memories. a young boy being abandoned by his father, and the young boy is being spoken to by a much younger Sophia. He also sees memories of the young boy making friends with another young boy, and the two were training to be stalkers. He sees the young boy, now a young man, trying to plead with a legendary stalker to teach him how to use a sword, but the stalker was annoyed at the young man's annoying persistence. But eventually the young boy died of the Petrification Disease. Moving on up the beach and into some ruins, P defeats the massive Door Guardian. Making his way through the Arch Abbey, P mows down many carcasses and hostile alchemists. Eventually, having ascended the abbey, P comes face to face with Black Cat. He demands some gold coin fruit, again, or he'll have to fight him. Choosing what to do, P moves on regardless. Having made his way up to the top of the abbey, he comes face to face with Laxasia the Complete, the imposing right hand of Simon Manus. She stands in the way of progress, so a fight ensues. She is unbelievably strong, but nonetheless, after a long battle, P manages to defeat her. With her dead, something happens to the tower behind her, and P must hurry. Entering the tower, P finds the real Sophia. True to what she said earlier, she is truly suffering and hooked up to a machine that draws her power. She asks him to save her, and P is now faced with a choice. He can either leave her be, prolonging her suffering, or he can end the suffering for her. Whatever option he chooses, P continues on up the tower, and eventually comes across the Red Fox who is there waiting for him. She basically says that the things that she has done have all been in the pursuit of her brother being able to see again. She says that she doesn't want to fight P, but will do what she needs to do. So, you've guessed it, she asks for a gesture and can choose whether or not to give gold coin fruit. If P does, then she allows him to pass. If not, then the two must face off. After being let through or fighting, P continues on and speaks with Geppetto, who is safe. He speaks of wanting P to grow up in a peaceful world, but he must ask P of one last thing. He says that Simon has gone completely mad and is trying to become a god by using a large amount of Ergo and a relic called the Arm of God. Geppetto wants P to ascend the tower and put an end to Simon's plans. Atop the tower, P approaches Simon. The Ergo has transformed him into a monster. Even with the reality of what he has turned into, he's still awestruck by the magnificence of the Ergo, calling it distilled immortality and the key that opens the door to a world with no lies, only truth, and one that unlocks true evolution. Avoiding his giant Ergo hammer, after he takes enough damage, he laughs and says that this is evolution. He then demonstrates that by discarding his fragile body, and according to him, by grasping the true power of a god. The Ergo attached to him then activates, and he becomes even more powerful, and he is now Simon, the awakened god. He's been upgraded too, and now has an even stronger bag of tricks. Despite this, P eventually bests him in combat. Afterwards, dying Simon asks P what he did for Sophia, but he says being able to read people's minds is a curse, and if it wasn't for Sophia, he wouldn't have been able to bear it. The purity of Sophia's heart was a tonic for his pain, and he used the Ergo to hold her there. After this conversation, and after Simon has been defeated, P has one last thing to do. Using the elevator, P descends and sees Geppetto there. He tells P that they have all the ingredients they need, and he says that he's been dreaming of this moment for a long time. The moment someone would come back to life. He tells P that he can become human again, and this can be done by using a huge supply of Ergo and the relic the Arm of God. Geppetto says that he just needs the final ingredient, P's heart. If he does, then all the trials and tribulations will be over, and he says that to reward P, he will turn him into a real boy. So again, P has a choice. For the game's bad ending, P agrees to give Geppetto his heart. He says that he always believed in P, with him being the greatest puppet he'd ever made. He thanks P, embracing him, and then rips P's heart out of his chest. Opening a box, he places the heart into another puppet, and afterwards, back in Hotel Krat, Geppetto stands outside and is approached by a brand new P. Well, it's not P, it's his son Carlo, who at one point had died from the Petrification Disease, and who P's image was based upon. After the game's end, if P gave his heart to Geppetto, P can check Geppetto's desk and finds a letter. He plans to stabilize Krat by getting the puppet and the Petrification Disease under control. He warns P about being careful with his body as he reacts to Ergo. This is due to the Arm of God. P is told to stay safe inside the hotel. If, on the other hand, P refuses, Geppetto is angry, tells P he's broken his heart, and then says that he's the puppet that will bring his son Carlo back to life. He goes over to the box. Removing his glove, he reveals that his arm has a way of using the power of Ergo. He uses it to control another puppet, which rises out of the box, the Nameless puppet. Controlling the Nameless puppet, he uses it to fight P. Eventually, during the fight, P and the Nameless puppet come together, and P aims a swing, chopping off part of the Nameless puppet's head. Unfortunately, this doesn't weaken him, it strengthens him. This is because Geppetto's control of the Nameless is now broken. Holding his own against a very tough enemy, the Nameless puppet goes to stab P in the heart, but Geppetto, realizing that P's heart is crucial for the resurrection of Carlo, sacrifices himself and the Nameless puppet kills him. P then thrusts his arm through the Nameless puppet's chest, killing it. For what is considered the best ending, the same thing happens as in the good ending. However, if P has accumulated enough humanity throughout his journey, after the fight and after Geppetto sacrifices himself, P will shed a tear. He's pretty much human at this point. He then, after Geppetto has died, returns to the top of the tower and sees a blue butterfly flying round. If P's humanity is high enough for his hair to have grown and turned grey, he places Sophia's Ergo into a puppet, allowing her to live on, and the credits then roll. Post-credits, a scene takes place. A man in a top hat called Paracelsus sits in a chair aboard a train. He speaks of having an update on the Krat experiment, referring to P as a new type of humanity. The woman he's speaking to says that eternal life can take many forms, and it's revealed that their experiments will continue. Paracelsus mentions that they have other experiments available, other keys, and he mentions one, Dorothy. Back in Krat, a girl wearing red shoes taps her heels together, hinting at a potential sequel set amongst the world of Wizard of Oz. The game then ends. Alright, as mentioned, that's a pretty surface level explanation of what the plot is, but let's now jump into the DLC Overture, whose events take place before all this had even happened. Upon going to the Stargazer in the hotel, P receives something called a Star's Chrysalis. When holding it, P has a mysterious vision of a tarnished and golden Stargazer. Remembering that he'd seen one on his journey through Krat, P goes to the Pilgrim's Path by the cathedral and he approaches the Stargazer. Using the Star's Chrysalis, the Stargazer is renewed, and touching it, P goes to another place in Krat. Fighting his way through more carcasses, which are animals along with former humans, P eventually reaches a snowy hillside and looks out, seeing Krat Zoo nearby. Gemini pipes up and thinks it's strange, especially since Krat Zoo has already burned down. Why is it not destroyed? It seems intact. Approaching the zoo, there are monstrous animals which have been affected. They are incredibly hostile and attack P, so he puts them down and enters the zoo itself.
To think that you would enter this place while I, Markiona, the puppeteer of death, am here. Have you no fear?
So a bit about the zoo. The zoo was built by the heroic explorer Colonel Little. It's said that Colonel Little slew a giant lion alongside his companion, a crocodile called Rex. It was after that he built the zoo in order to share his adventures. But back to it. On the second floor balcony, he finds a dying man there bleeding out. He initially thinks that P is Madame Stalker. He then realizes that P is not her, saying that he thought she had returned to save him. He describes the Stalker as having red hair and says that she helped him escape. He speaks of a bounty and that it blinded him. He found a clue, something at the Savannah Experience Center in the zoo, and he hands P a missing persons poster. It's of Romeo. The man dies, so P leaves and makes his way to the Savannah Experience Center, fighting more monstrosities on the way. Gemini says that it's possible that the Golden Stargazer had sent them back in time. He says that he remembers a day when snow was falling on the zoo. Having reached the Savannah Experience Center, P makes his way through the center, which shows signs of the red-haired stalker having passed through here. Before being able to leave the area, P is forced into a confrontation with the tyrannical predator, a very large and aggressive crocodile which has been completely overtaken by the Petrification Disease. Managing to kill it, P pushes forward and comes across a puppet called an arch puppet. It says that its eternal master rules the zoo, someone called Markiona, and that P cannot enter without her permission. Attempting to enter a door marked Carnival, it appears that they need a key to do so. P goes off in search of the key in the nearest building, which is the greenhouse. Markiona addresses him again.
This zoo is my domain, and you dare disturb it with your troublemaking, your ructions, your mischief. It's a wonder you've got this far, but abandon all hope of leaving here, alive.
It does seem that Markiona isn't actually addressing P at all, but someone else. Perhaps the red-haired stalker. Anyway, battling his way through Markiona's puppets, he eventually circles round and enters a room. Inside, he finds some alchemists there, dead, and Gemini states that he recognizes the killer's handiwork. This is the work of the legendary Stalker. Her calling cards are the numerous petals by the bodies. P then finds a recording from the legendary Stalker, and it's a stark warning to Markiona.
This is a message for Markiona, my sadly not departed friend. Important matters brought me to your door. I am searching for my lost apprentice. And it should come as no surprise that I thought you or your other alchemist fiends had taken him. I hope you don't mind, but I made a mess of your lackeys as I passed through. If you do, consider it partial payment for what happened to my other apprentice. As soon as I am able, I shall return to collect your remaining debt. Until then, take care not to die. From Leia, Florence, Monad.
Passing into the botanical gardens via the roof, P comes face to face with Markiona, along with one of her arch puppets. Again, it's clear that P is not who she was expecting. Nonetheless, she needs taking down, so P fights her along with her puppet, which she is controlling via Ergo. Defeating Markiona, she is dead and drops her key, meaning that P can now head through to the carnival area. Upon walking down the tunnel though, we see a flashback of Leia having walked down this corridor earlier on.
I'll kill him.
Moving on from this grisly sight, P arrives at the carnival. In the carnival, P can of course have some fun, but he can't stay there long, so after fighting a familiar foe, he finds a key for the gate to the tram station and gets out of there shortly after arriving at Hotel Krat. As expected, since they're in the past, Hotel Krat looks very different. There in the hotel is a man named Lumakio. He's leader of the bastard faction of the Stalkers, and since P is affiliated with neither, he assumes P is a member of the Sweeper faction. P asks about the redhead stalker, Leia Florence, and Lumakio says that she headed down via a lift in the hotel not long ago. He talks of a poor, crazed lunatic afflicted with the Petrification Disease down there. Asking what year it is, Lumakio finds this strange and suggests that P is afflicted with the Petrification Disease, not knowing that P is actually a puppet. He claims that the Alchemists are to be trusted and that their medicine is safe. He says P could find a cure at the Rose Estate. Also there is a rather large man named Klaus, who says that he is a merchant and a collector of rare Ergo. He says that Leia, the legendary stalker, rescued him at the zoo, and after taking him to the hotel, she said she was going to find her apprentice in some sort of laboratory. Klaus reveals that P is in a time before the Grand Exhibition had even been cancelled, so the Petrification Disease hasn't gripped the main city yet. He mentions that he's heard whispers that the Alchemists lost something. Anyway, the elevator, instead of taking him to the relic of Trismegistus, as it did previously, or in the future, P is taken to a laboratory site called the Zelator facility. He immediately sees the corpse of an alchemist surrounded by petals, which again indicates Leia came through here. Making his way through the facility, fighting off abandoned and failed test subjects and guards, P occasionally hears the screams of a woman. Hoping the screams aren't those of Leia, he pushes through and encounters the poor crazed lunatic that Lumacchio spoke of. This is Veronique, the leader of the Sweepers. She and her vanguard had been led there, but had been led into a trap by the Alchemists. They captured the Sweepers. One of them, still alive, explains what happened.
Everything's wrong. What strange drugs did they fill me with? Open eye. It is slow, but sure. Steady. And so strange. I will become a monster.
Suffering from the effects of the Petrification Disease, Veronique desperately tries to cling on to her humanity, but the rage in her is too strong. P is forced to engage her and defeats her, with some of her final words being an apology. She does mention the cursed lab and talks about an abomination below called the Two-Faced Overseer. She asks P to kill it and go to the coast to find Leia, and she then dies. Letting the freezing cold air by shutting down the coolant, P then moves into another part of the facility and he comes across the tracker. This is the real Alidoro, prior to him being screwed over by Parrot, of course. However, he says that he's keeping his real identity secret to protect someone close to him, hence the name Tracker. P tells him what has been going on, and upon showing him the monad locket he found at the zoo, which contains a bloodied photo of Leia and Romeo, along with a third person, the Tracker believes him. He too hates the Alchemists. He says that he's tracking a dangerous relic that the Alchemists freed from the ruins. Something that is wreaking torment on Krat. It's the Arm of God. The tests and experiments of the Alchemists have already yielded results, and one subject has become a living weapon. The Tracker wishes to stop it. He gives P a horn and says that if he finds the Two-Faced Overseer, this subject, to sound the horn, and he will come fight alongside him. Finally, he says that in order to get to the Rose estate, there's an underground tram which runs to the estate. It should be located at the end of the facility. Moving on and through the various labs in the facility, P confronts the Two-Faced Overseer. Using the horn, P summons the Tracker to fight by his side. After a tense battle, the Two-Faced Overseer has been dealt with, and the Tracker says that he'll make his way to Hotel Krat. He departs after saying that P's fighting style reminds him of someone. Returning to the hotel at this point, it would seem, according to Klaus, that Lumacchio is no longer there at the hotel and quickly left after having received some documents. The Tracker is now there, of course. The Tracker mentions that Leia is suffering from the Petrification Disease, and that he had given her some painkillers in order for her to be able to bear the excruciating pain she is in as the disease takes hold. He says that the Alchemists are apparently developing a cure, but he's wary of anything they offer as he doesn't trust them. Finally, the Tracker says that he found out the reason Romeo was taken, an act of revenge that an infamous and murderous puppet had carried out against Leia by kidnapping her apprentice. He mentions the name Arlecchino. Moving back through the facility again, P exits and experiences a violent rumbling coming from somewhere, and is now at an abandoned excavation site which is in some ancient ruins. He comes across Lumacchio, who states that the loss of Veronique is indeed a great loss, but his statement lacks the sincerity needed to believe it. He asks if Veronique said anything to him before she died. P can lie and claims she told him nothing or tell the truth. He says that the tram to the Rose estate has been out of commission for a while. He gives P a key to the secret ruins that had been given to him by a dying alchemist, and claims that the key opens a secret, alternate passage to the coast. So, leaving Lumacchio after listening to his feeble attempts at explaining what he's doing there, P gets going. It seems this place is indeed abandoned, as the only things down here are industrial robots and mining puppets, still working hard in the Ergo mine as if nothing had happened. P later arrives at the Pistris harbour, and passing through, P arrives at the deepest site in the ancient ruins. Opening a door, he's in for a surprise. This is the Anguished Guardian, an ancient being that was initially there in order to protect the arm of God. It's a tough battle, with the Guardian calling on some ancient magic in order to try and kill P, but it fails and P is able to defeat it. Leaving this place, the sealed altar of the arm of God, he finds a small camp which was left by Leia before she departed, and he finds a recording from Arlecchino to Leia, which explains a lot about why he's so mad at her and hellbent on revenge.
You took many things from me. Arms, legs, a sunny outlook on life. And then you drove nine blades through me. All on your own. So, I have only you to thank, yes? I am grateful. When you have listened to this message, do pay a visit to the Rose Estate.
P leaves the camp and arrives at the coast and sees some large shipwrecks there. These ships were part of a fleet that wrecked. They were Alchemist-owned ships, essentially, so there are a lot of alchemists around here. On one of the ships, P finds a brig area with a load of dead alchemist guards telling us someone or something was being transported. This was none other than Arlecchino, who the alchemists considered intriguing. Fighting his way through the alchemist, along with fighting sea creatures afflicted with the Petrification Disease, P boards one particular shipwreck and is surprised as Lumacchio bursts through a door and tells P he's been a nuisance. He's clearly very annoyed that the Guardian didn't kill P and talks about his part in Simon's grand plan. It seems that Veronique dug too deep into the Stalkers, who were involved in the experiments and who were in league with the Alchemists. Finding out that Lumacchio was involved, shock horror, and this is how she and her vanguard got infected. He had planned to take out Leia too, but she's a little bit stronger than Veronique, and now he's looking for her around there, demanding to know where she is. P and Lumacchio fight, and when injured enough, he'll drink an elixir given to him by the Alchemists, which he claims is a reward for his contributions. However, he's been duped, along with everyone else, when this elixir turns out to be nothing at all other than a means for him to become infected with the disease. He duly transforms into an abomination, but this is evolution, according to the Alchemists. Defeating his mutated state, he states that he was the chosen one, that he drank the real elixir, and he begs P to spare him. He talks about how he was forced to pick a side, otherwise he'd end up like Veronique and Leia, afflicted with the disease. That turned out well, didn't it? He asks P to let him go so that he can get treatment. P can either kill or spare Lumacchio, but either way he ends up dead. P then reaches a lighthouse and sees the Rose Estate in the distance. He then follows a snowy path up to a shack, and inside he finds Leia.
Who are you? You look familiar. Wait. This is Romeo's locket.
After gathering their strength, she and P carry on up the path, eventually arriving at the Rose Estate, where Romeo and Arlecchino are. The Rose Estate, or the Monad Charity House, was the location where the majority of notable people in Krat fled due to the worsening Petrification Disease situation. Klaus, back in the hotel, had himself received an invitation to go there. Entering the estate itself, Leia and P are in for a nasty shock.
Not you. Not like this. This wasn't supposed to happen. Romeo.
Leaving her there, P moves on through the estate and sees that the many people there have succumbed to the disease, including the staff. Many people here are already dead too, the handiwork of Arlecchino. However, the alchemists had already been here at some point themselves as they were looking for something. They were looking for the Arm of God, and for Sophia, but the Arm of God was gone, the thing that the alchemists had lost. In line with what we saw in the base game, they did eventually get it back. Passing through the library, P makes it to the entrance to the Rose Gardens and hears the sounds of fighting. He opens the gates to the courtyard.
Where's the legend I faced before? Shut up, you filthy puppet! Oh, no. I must ask. Did you actually believe you could save your beloved apprentice? Pathetic! And who might you be?
Going at Arlecchino alone, or choosing to help Leia up to aid him in the fight, both of them fight the murderous puppet, and cause enough damage for him to transform into his next phase.
This is exactly what I've been waiting for! This! The Alchemists offered me nothing but boredom. But you two, you'll offer me something greater, won't you?
He is now even more deadly, but after some serious punishment, Arlecchino is finished.
Impressive.
Thank you. It's yours now. All this time, I wondered why you look so familiar. And now I know. Carlo.
After this, none other than Geppetto walks up the steps with the case containing the nameless puppet. Leia looks up with Romeo breathing his dying breaths in her arms, and she smiles, a sign that she's accepted her inevitable death. The nameless puppet then, it's assumed, kills Leia. P then wakes up in his original timeline again. When P was in the past timeline, he was actually able to alter his own timeline through his actions. Although he couldn't save Romeo from his becoming the king of puppets or Leia from her death, he did have a positive impact. One thing he can affect is when he meets Goddard, a blind painter at the tram station before leaving the carnival for Hotel Krat. She says that she lost her eyesight in a lab accident, and later, P can find her paint set in the Zelator facility, takes them to her, and she completes a painting before dying. P can then take the painting to the hotel and places it on the wall. When back in his original but affected timeline, the painting is there. There are other things that are affected by P's actions, but a lot of these will be covered in various upcoming sections of the video. So let's now jump deeper into the lore and unpack some of the more hidden mysteries of Krat. So Krat was at one point very different from how we see it in the game, previously a poor coastal town. Old families in Krat were essentially the caretakers and the privileged people who ruled over and owned areas of Krat. These areas had been passed down through the generations of those families. However, with the arrival of the Alchemists and the workshop, their power waned. So Krat used to be a poor town, but became a bustling city with a rich economy and a strong infrastructure. But how did this happen? Well, around 600 years prior to the game's events, an inorganic cluster structure was found after the ground collapsed. Bodies were recovered, and people found an unknown mineral amongst the ruins at the bottom of the pit. The minerals were valuable and were named Crowd. The pit was named the Relic of Trismegistus, and the mineral they'd found had components of something called Ergo in it. Ergo was the essence of life, the soul, or at least a manifestation of it, that would leave a human body upon their passing. Normally, this substance would ascend, but when within Crowd, it gets absorbed by the crowd and trapped within it, causing it to become crystallized. Centuries later, the Alchemists had arrived in Krat, and they had now discovered that the Relic of Trismegistus was essentially a huge Ergo mine and was very valuable. Hotel Krat was located above the pit, and the hotel would work together with the Alchemists. Krat was using coal as its main power source, but that changed after they discovered that the Ergo could be used as a power source now. Therefore, the coal mines were shut down, and the location around these coal mines would become known as the Barren Swamp. Ergo then became not only the city's primary power source, but their currency too, and it would be supplied by the Alchemists, who I guess by this point had taken control of the Relic of Trismegistus. Krat soon became a hub of innovation, and this leads us on to the arrival of an alchemist who would alter the fate of Krat forever. This man was the inventor, Giuseppe Geppetto. Giuseppe Geppetto was the leader of the workshop union. The workshop technicians were skilled craftsmen who were originally watchmakers. Geppetto would join up with the Venini family, and they would work together in order to mass manufacture puppets all across Krat. These puppets would be powered by Ergo, bound to a code known as the Grand Covenant. More on that later. Puppets would be able to complete simple daily tasks, such as cleaning and even taking up jobs in law enforcement. When they moved, puppets tapped into the Ergo inside of them. Ergo was the miracle that made Krat prosper. But the advancement and integration of these automated puppets created an imbalance in society, but the people of Krat still liked that the mundane jobs were being carried out by puppets instead, giving them the freedom to enjoy more things in life. The Vaninis themselves went on to have a son and named him Lorenzini Vanini. Vanini would go on to become a famous inventor too, building and running the previously mentioned puppet factory called Vanini Works from the age of 18. The young man's genius made Geppetto jealous, however, and he felt very threatened. Vanini would design a tram system, the new puppet of the future, and also a Vanini company submarine named Pistris, which ran off of lead-acid batteries. Eventually, after all these years of innovation, Krat was finally ready to show off the future of automation, the power of Ergo, to the rest of the world via a showcase at the Grand Exhibition. However, this event would never take place. At one point, Geppetto's wife, called Camille, died in an accident. More on that shortly, and this incident tore Geppetto apart. Krat then got struck by multiple disasters, but before we talk about those, let's first break down the story of the Alchemists. The Alchemists are a mysterious faction. These mystics work towards the pursuit of knowledge. Mainly made up of doctors and scientists, their history is a mysterious one too. Their founder and leader was Valentinus Monad, a former archaeologist. He was devoted to discovering the secret to eternal life. Their motto, wake up, evolve, and ascend. But a bit about Valentinus. A family man, Valentinus was married to Isabel and was father to Sophia. They adopted a girl at some point too, and she was named Leia Florence, and of course, she would go on to become the legendary Stalker. More on her backstory later, but for now, back to the Alchemists. The Monad family, who remember were very wealthy and influential, founded a charity house in order to help poor young children in the city. According to the Monad Charity House Guide, children received an education that aligned to their aptitude and career path. They could learn to be a stalker, an alchemist, or a workshop technician. The choosing of a path for one's life at a young age is very likely where the Black Rabbit Brotherhood originated from. It's the alchemists' belief that a star came to Earth at some point, pretended to be a human, and wanted to grant the people the gift of immortality after having heard their wishes. They would call it an angel. However, this god was torn apart after this gift was not what they had been expecting. It's thought that this god coming to Earth may have been in the form of a meteorite made of crowd, and that meteorite may have been the very first source of Ergo. Awakening this god by finding the arm of God would become one of the alchemists' foremost goals. As for where they were from, the Alchemists were located at Arch Abbey on the Isle of Alchemists, a foreign land, but how did this group end up in Krat? When the Alchemists first came to Krat, they arrived at a place called Moonlight Town. The town were a community of faithful people. According to a guidebook, the town is the lowest place in the city where pilgrims prepared for their journeys by being lifted up to a cathedral. The cathedral was founded, according to legend, when Saint Frangelico met the one-winged angel. The Alchemists actually helped transform the town, and Krat became the booming city we see in the game, and one of the advances in Moonlight Town itself was turning the pulleys into cable cars. To the rear of what would become the Zelator facility, the Alchemists started excavating some ancient ruins they'd discovered, a place likely connected to the relic of Trismegistus, and they'd found something underground.
But the Alchemists found something else underground. Something so dangerous, most of them fled. They'd say, retreated. I've heard Alchemists found it sealed away in the ruins deeper underground. Now, I don't buy this, but my sources claim the discovery was alive. But not human. Perhaps that is why the Alchemists seem to have cleared out.
This discovery was, of course, the Guardian located at the altar of the Arm of God. The beast was tasked with guarding the Arm of God. They'd found it, and it would be kept close to Valentinus Monad at the Rose Estate. This site, according to the rulebook for this place, the deepest site in the ruins, was a strict secret. It was so secret that the Alchemists had collapsed a tunnel in an Ergo mine, withdrawing all the human miners just to keep that secret safe. The Guardian was, according to his Ergo, a warrior who swore an oath to enter permanent sleep, and in return his people would be protected from immortality. It's not known where he came from. Perhaps, as a warrior, he and other warriors considered that death was part of their journey. I don't know, that's just a theory. This being was subjected to experimentation by the Alchemists, who were required to approach the subject in large groups, and without being in possession of high quantities of Ergo, as this would agitate the subject. And this is precisely what happened when P entered the altar. The Ergo inside him woke the beast up. He'd been horrifically mutated as a result of the Petrification Disease, and he'd gotten the name the Anguished Guardian of the Ruins. But on to another renowned alchemist. Camille, who, remember, was Geppetto's wife, was herself a brilliant engineer and alchemist, and she created a marvel known as the Saintess of Mercy statue. Anyway, after the incident which claimed Camille's life, Valentinus Monad would write to Geppetto and convey his deepest sympathies, telling him that the Order would provide their support for the funeral arrangements. He also mentioned the good relationship between the workshop and the Order. The Alchemists had, at some point in time, discovered that the puppets that were powered by the Ergo were developing a sense of ego after a puppet named Camille, a maid puppet, caught a baby as it fell from its crib, and Camille started to understand human language. This would happen in other puppets too. Discovering Camille's awakened ego is what sparked the Alchemists' intrigue into immortality. Truth is that Camille's Ergo is thought to be the Ergo or spirit of Geppetto's Camille. He had worked with the Alchemists in his desire and desperation for Camille to live on, so to speak. And when she said the words, "Send me back to my child," Geppetto then formulated a plan to make that happen, to bring Carlo back somehow. The Alchemists also had a good relationship with the church. They would donate a very large amount of money towards the restoration of the St. Frangelico Cathedral. But this relationship would not last forever, as it seems that certain members of the Alchemists had been carrying out nefarious experiments from the shadows. So at some point, Lorenzini Vanini had noticed that the state of Ergo was getting worse over time. He had requested an investigation and report into this by his factory manager. According to that report, the manager considered the degradation in quality too widespread to be a mere coincidence. He would foresee that the continual decline in the quality of Ergo would result in a high chance of defects in puppets. He had heard that the Alchemists were responsible for this, as they had of course been conducting experiments on the Ergo. Just as the factory manager had heard, the Alchemists were indeed doing their own experiments on Ergo, and ever since they had discovered it, they had been bringing out the bodies of discarded puppets and had been disposing of them near the old coal mines in the barren swamp. Effectively, the Alchemists had discovered the effects of Ergo spores on humans, and these effects led to the Petrification Disease being discovered. The Alchemists would try to make a cure for it, but this only caused the sufferer a painful death and resulted in many carcasses. This brings us to the listener experiments too. Listener experiments were being carried out in the Zelator laboratories. It turns out that Geppetto's Camille was a listener herself. The Alchemists learned this, and they experimented on her. An incident and carelessness by the researchers resulted in the death of Camille, resulting in the Order having to carry out terminations in order to cover up the real cause of her death. This cover-up and these terminations were in the form of a cruise ship disaster, as it was indirectly reported that Camille was on board. Anyway, the people trying to carry out this experiment were trying to create a link between the listeners and the Great One's relics. The one listener we actually see in the game is Sophia Monad. This is an ability that Sophia had inherited from her mother, Isabel. According to Sophia, Ergo came to eventually reach out to her, and it wanted her to know that it was once human, the purified essence of human life, and that life had become trapped inside the Ergo due to the Petrification Disease. Due to Ergo being used as a power source in puppets, Sophia would be able to communicate with them via the Ergo and the human essence trapped inside it. As a listener, she had the ability to manipulate time by harnessing the power of Ergo. So a key example of this is when P dies in game, Sophia rewinds time. I think it's safe to assume that Valentinus knew of the alchemist experiments taking place, but he was a little bit ignorant as to how much extra stuff was happening, and many of his allies would write to him expressing that Simon had been pursuing his own path to immortality, being aided by large numbers of alchemists who considered Valentinus to be a turncoat. One of Valentinus's proteges, Luca, had even tried 9 times to indict Simon, and pretty much begged Valentinus to call an assembly. You see, at some point, as we saw in the DLC, the Arm of God was located at the Monad Charity House. Simon had considered that this valuable relic was crucial to their path. He needed it, and badly. They discovered that Valentinus had entrusted it to the St. Frangelico Cathedral, maybe as a result of him being warned of what Simon was doing. The Alchemists saw this as treachery. It was at this point that Leia Florence started to clash with Simon. Simon needed her out of the way, so he quietly and unofficially placed a bounty on her head, and this led to her disappearance. She left a letter to Valentinus which read that she's sorry for her betrayal, but that walking the Monad path was too painful, and that she didn't want to get dragged down into the abyss with him. She reveals that the Rose Sword had been gifted to her by Valentinus, and that she would use it to fight for something righteous. She writes about her apprentices growing, clearly proud of them, and she wonders if he feels the same way about her when he looks at her. Simon, on the other hand, needed a listener, and who better than Sophia? He tried to lure Sophia to the harbour at one point, but she considered this suspicious due to the timing of the request and declined. As for Valentinus, he ended up receiving a letter from the Grand Master of the Order, and was excommunicated. He had abandoned the path of truth, apparently, but his greatest sin was him having given the Arm of God to Archbishop Andreas. The Grand Master sent with the letter an excommunicant's cure, likely the divine elixir, and it's considered that Valentinus did not take it. The Grand Master says that his sea monster is on the move. This is referring to Simon. Simon is known as Simon of Pistris, and Pistris means sea monster. He signs off the letter by stating that Valentinus will not see eternity, so he gave him the opportunity to evolve as his final act. Let's talk a bit about Simon. When he was younger, Simon was experimented on by his father. In his confession, Simon states that the one who made him was not a normal human, that his abilities were extraordinary. He claimed the ability to read minds. But let's go back to his desire to advance evolution. Having had enough and needing to take full control of the Order to advance his goals, Simon would eventually make his move. Having gained influence over the majority of the Order, he had orders delivered which sent his loyal alchemists to assault both the Rose Estate, the Monad Charity House, and the Cathedral. Valentinus and Isabel Monad died in the assault on the Rose Estate, and Simon took Sophia back to the Isle of Alchemists. It's there that he would hook her up to a machine, but this was not because of her abilities, really. It's because he admired her. And he was also pretty jealous of her too because of her power. On the night of the Archon fleet incident involving Arlecchino, it would seem that the fleet was heading back to the Isle of Alchemists, and by the looks of an unsent letter written by a member of the Order to his wife, he writes in a panic that Simon planned to kill all who opposed him. Basically, that means anyone who is loyal to Valentinus. Man was cleaning house. You see, Simon also desired to create a world without lies, a world where no one betrays you and there's only truth. He decided to give up being human and decided to walk the path of immortality and the truth, and he would become God. The idea that Simon was to become God was already being documented by his followers. One particular follower was Sister Adriana, who would document the words of Simon in the So Said Pistris books. He began to tell his followers all about eternal life, about the God that was torn apart and their hope of reviving him. Sister Adriana would fall in love with Simon, and in other writings, Adriana would refer to Simon as the one who will swallow even God. The symbol of the alchemists would be the Ouroboros, the snake eating its own tail. This sign represents the cycle of eternity, birth, life, and death. It shows a snake devouring its own tail, showing that from every ending comes a new beginning. One way the alchemists would try to bring about evolution was that they would start messing around and experimenting with the arm of God, but this did not go well at all. Some of the other experiments were documented by the alchemists. A subject, 826, upon meeting P, says that he was being forced to consume Ergo. He says that they were making him do this in order to read the memories contained within. P can meet this subject in the Abbey and then later at Rosa Isabel Street. In line with their experiments on the worsening condition of Ergo, they started using the Black Rabbit Brotherhood to steal bodies so that Ergo could be extracted from them as well, hence why the Black Rabbit Brotherhood were wanted for such crimes. Secrets about the alchemists started to leak. People would leave and rumours would spread that they were in fact planning to unleash a disaster on Krat, a disaster involving Ergo. Simon would build a machine and place it in the tower of the Abbey, with that machine's purpose being to absorb all the Ergo in Krat, and we see this. As P kills various puppets and enemies in Krat, the Ergo is collected by Simon's machine and he uses it to ascend to godhood. In fact, the Abbey being built on that particular island was significant, as it's the most efficient place in the world to study and use Ergo wavelengths. The conniving ways of the alchemists, though, are best seen through the story of the Archbishop Andreas. After Andreas was appointed priest of the St. Frangelico Cathedral around 30 years before the game takes place, as mentioned before, he accepted a large donation from the alchemists in return for land. Over time, the Archbishop would become more and more corrupted, lost to greed. After the Petrification Disease hit Krat, Andreas would consider this an act of God's divine judgment, and he would consider himself to be the saviour that Krat needed. He worked together with the Atoned, who would help survivors get to the cathedral, after he'd helped distribute a cure for the disease of the sick people developed by the alchemists, part of their plan to purify the heresy of the unbelievers. They finally discovered that the cure wasn't a cure at all. It made things worse and the sick would suffer, becoming carcasses. Andreas would therefore vow revenge on the alchemists. One of the nuns at the cathedral, named Cecil, a murderer, was taken in by the Archbishop, and he had her steal back the Arm of God relic. He planned to use the Arm of God in order to heal Krat, but never got round to it, as he ended up mutating into the form that P encounters in the cathedral, lost to his madness and declaring that he himself is the one-winged angel. During the game, P repeatedly meets the Red Fox and the Black Cat. Simon had tasked the Red Fox and the Black Cat to follow P so that he could lead them to the Arm of God that the Archbishop Andreas had stolen from the alchemists. Okay, so now let's look at the story of Carlo, Geppetto's son. We learn of Carlo's childhood and his formative years by way of the memories that P sees at the Black Beach on the Alchemist's Isle. When Camille died, Geppetto threw himself into his work, so much so that he decided to ship Carlo off to the Monad Charity House. Geppetto wouldn't really ever visit Carlo either. Heck, Geppetto didn't even attend Carlo's graduation. This was met with the ire of people such as Lady Antonia, as she felt that Geppetto was shirking his fatherly duties and that Carlo needed his father. Geppetto would write back, telling Lady Antonia that since Camille died, he struggles to recognise the world. He showcases his need for adoration, praise and attention. He says that losing Camille changed him, and that he wanted Carlo to grow up in Camille's world, which is essentially a world without him because, she's a puppet now, and he believes abandoning Carlo is the right thing to do. Lady Antonia would go on to teach Carlo to play the piano, and he played it well too. We also see new parts of Carlo's childhood through Rosaura in Overture. During Carlo's childhood, it's possible that he really wanted a sibling, so Geppetto created a puppet friend for Carlo named Rosaura. During P's journey through the carnival area of the zoo, he can meet Rosaura. She talks about being locked in a birdcage by Markiona in her workshop, and that she was freed from the cage by the white butterfly, the same white butterfly that led P to the Golden Stargazer. She speaks of having a precious friend that she misses dearly, a friend that she used to play with all the time at the Rose Estate. This friend was Carlo. At certain points on P's journey to the Rose Estate, he can help Rosaura, who piece by piece gives him a drawing of Geppetto, Camille, Carlo, and Rosaura back when they were a happy family. One day, Carlo struck up a friendship with another young boy named Romeo, and they both had aspirations of becoming stalkers, which, as mentioned earlier, was one of the vocations a child at the charity house could choose to work towards. Carlo would also gift Romeo his graduation pendant. Anyway, Carlo also met Leia and befriended her, along with Romeo, and the three of them would play music together. Carlo would beg her to teach him how to use a sword. However, Leia found Carlo's persistence annoying rather than endearing, and told Gemini, yep, P's Gemini, to get rid of him, and Leia left for reasons we've already discussed. Then the outbreak of the Petrification Disease took place at the charity house. Carlo died, and Leia returned with her regretting her decision to abandon him. Upon altering time through the Golden Stargazer, Leia's words towards the deceased Carlo have changed, with her expressing that she's grateful to Carlo. After Carlo had died, Geppetto attempted to revive him, but this did not work at all. The result of this experiment was the nameless puppet, Carlo's emaciated body. Geppetto had created the puppet heart, the P organ, and placed this inside Nameless. However, as Carlo's body was just an empty husk, instead of reacting well to the Ergo inside it, it had the opposite effect, and would likely result in the complete destruction of Carlo's precious Ergo. The only emotion Nameless was able to feel was hatred. So Geppetto was at a loss. He needed a tremendous amount of Ergo in order to go through the process of reviving Carlo. I guess the first time Geppetto had actually used the Nameless puppet was to kill Leia, so that he could take Romeo's body, because even though she's dying from the disease, Leia could have killed Geppetto easily, which leads to the next part of Geppetto's plan. The next part of his plan involved creating P, again with a P organ but a modified version of it. But remember, it still needed a large amount of Ergo. Where could Geppetto get such an amount? Romeo, who was dying from the Petrification Disease himself at this point, agreed to be turned into a puppet capable of housing his Ergo inside it. Geppetto agreed, but in return plotted, and his plan was to force Romeo to lead the puppets in carrying out the puppet frenzy. Again, more on that later in the video. This way, Romeo would be blamed for the puppet frenzy and not Geppetto. This plan would also have the benefit of denying large amounts of Ergo to the Alchemists, whilst ensuring a large supply for his own gain. Geppetto then executed Law 0 for the puppets to obey their creator, and Romeo then commanded the puppets to kill humans so Geppetto could start harvesting Ergo. After he was transformed into a puppet and carried out the puppet frenzy, Romeo gradually regained his memories, realised what he was doing, broke away, and became the king of puppets we see in the game. He then led the puppets in their revolt against Geppetto, the Alchemists, and the Petrification Disease, or carcasses. His best puppets were of course the Parade Master, the Scrapped Watchman, and Fuoco. The latter's job was to guard the flames of the Vanini Works puppet factory. Descartes' note mentions that Fuoco started to obey something other than humans, almost as if he developed faith in some god. Fuoco then, hearing Romeo's words over the Ergo waves, took control of the factory, instead using the factory to produce more puppets for Romeo's revolt. This god that Fuoco believed in was the King of Puppets, and the King of Puppets was controlling puppets all across Krat. Romeo's revolt explains why Romeo held out his hand to P, as he didn't want to fight him, as Romeo had learned that P held Carlo's Ergo within him. This is why Romeo put on a show at the Opera House to give P a hint as to what Geppetto was up to. It's also why P, apparently, prior to learning the truth via the Golden Stargazer, looks ill when he learns of the origin of the necklace he obtained by defeating Romeo. Because it's the necklace Carlo gave to Romeo. The Ergo, the humanity in P that belonged to Carlo, vaguely remembers. This links into something that Sophia says when she states that Ergo contains the memories and distilled lifespan of the victim, Carlo. We learn from a message that Romeo to P, Carlo, that he had tried to reach out to him many times.
Carlo, I'm Romeo. We grew up together in the Monad Charity House. Remember? We're best friends. I'm doing what I can to fend off both the Petrification Disease and the Alchemists. That's why I tried sending you messengers. But you got rid of them all. You're still an unstoppable fellow. I remember you. No reason for us to fight, I suppose. I'm Romeo. We grew up together in the Romeo.
These messengers that P kept destroying were the bosses that he fought and killed. This is why during those fights they appear to say things to P, but he cannot understand them as at this point he doesn't yet have Vanini's Ergo wavelength detector. As for Rosura, at some point she tells P that she'll wait for him by a tree of friendship, which is by the city hall in Krat. Going there after the DLC, if P has helped her, she will be there with the previous carving on the tree having changed from the original timeline, and it now reads, "Thank you for becoming my friend again, my dearly missed." She says that friends always meet again, and that she'll wait for him at the world's end, and she passes away. So let's go back a bit. You all remember Markiona from the DLC? Well, despite her short screen time in the DLC, she had a pretty storied past. Once upon a time, Markiona was a technician in the Workshop Union and worked alongside Geppetto. This, I guess, is why she had a similar device on her arm to the one Geppetto used in order to control the Nameless. She was a master puppeteer. Same as Geppetto, she used this device to tether herself to her arch puppets via Ergo. It was Markiona who had discovered the puppet that would become the sacred maid puppet, Camille, and it was to her a sign from God that showed her the potential of immortality. She started to believe in the Alchemists' path to ascension and their search for immortality through evolution. Eventually, Markiona left the Workshop Union and joined the Alchemists, being elevated to a high position thanks to her achievements in the Workshop Union. She earned the title of the Enlightened One, and she created the Brotherhood of Truth too. People who slandered her name were dealt with and would be taken to the Zelator labs where they would be interrogated. In one particular interrogation, an Alchemist member had actually terminated an experiment because of the abominations they were creating, stating that this is not the true path for humanity. Not just for the sacrifice, but for themselves as human beings with morals. This person seems to be suggesting that the carcasses had come about from something that Markiona had done. This accused person then presents themselves as a member of the Order's Salamander division, and speaks of an incident when Markiona meant nothing to the Order. This interrogation document seems to imply that Camille, the secret maid puppet, had the Ergo of someone who raised Markiona inside it. Perhaps they're talking here about Camille potentially being a mentor of Markiona, but who knows, this is more speculation at this point. Moving on, this leads us to Krat Zoo. As explained earlier on, the zoo was founded by Colonel Little, the explorer. At some point it was said that he was killed and eaten by Rex, and this just so happened to be around the time that the Alchemists were interested in acquiring the zoo for themselves. After Colonel Little had died, a taxidermist named Filato, who was a close friend of the Colonel, had been placed in charge of the zoo by request in the will of the Colonel. The Alchemists then purchased the zoo. The Alchemists insisted that Filato stuff and mount Rex, but Filato felt great pain over his friend's death as a result of this animal. He did, however, carry out the task, like a man possessed, it needs to be noted. Filato then vanished one day, with the mystery being that the mounted croc, which contained the evil spirit of Rex, killed and ate Filato. Receiving the bloody cipher and having the tracker unlock it, a clue leads to the stuffed animal stating the words "target neutralized" and "you are now the sole master of the zoo, congrats Lady M," meaning Markiona. Pressing a button on the crocodile opens its mouth, and it contains a hidden necropsy report on the crocodile written by Filato the taxidermist. It reads that he found no human tissue between the reptile's teeth, and that the wound on Colonel Little's body is inconsistent with a crocodile's bite. He concludes that the Colonel had been murdered by the Alchemists. He is sad about the fact that he is too cowardly to report the Alchemists, so he left the report in the mouth of Rex. The Alchemists wanted full control of the zoo, and they got it. The zoo was essentially their testing ground for the Petrification Disease. Markiona used her experimental arch puppets to spread the divine elixir, and they were ready to do the same around Krat. She would write to Simon to tell him that she could help in spreading the elixir through Krat, and she spoke of Rosora as the key to something, although quite why she had Rosora locked in the birdcage and why Rosora was the key to her plan was never really explained. It's possible that since an amulet states that Markiona had a need to dominate others, she could have been planning to seize control of the order from Simon Manus by using her arch puppets, but again, we don't know that for sure. Throughout the main game, P can answer public phones, and on the other end is someone who wants P to solve riddles. For this reason, he is now known as the King of Riddles. Answering one of his riddles correctly will reward P with a Trinity key, which unlocks secret and mysterious rooms around Krat. It could be that these rooms were meeting places of 3 of the most important and most powerful people in the city, a secret society, if you will. Anyway, answering all of the riddles, P can meet Arlecchino. Now, the problem with Ergo is that it has a human ego attached to it, given that it's the essence of human life. That's how the puppets in the game have been changing, developing human characteristics. Speaking with what remains of Arlecchino at the Abbey, he gives us some story on his background. He used to serve an alchemist, a surgeon, but one day, Arlecchino's ego was awoken. He understood that he was human. He started to harbour deep hatred for humans and resented how they would trap and imprison people's ergo essence inside puppets. He viewed puppets as equal to humans and not inferior. He tortured his master, and his master told him where the Alchemist's island was. He would become determined to exact his revenge on humans. He'd kill and he'd enjoy it. He would make up riddles and speak in rhymes in order to distract himself from the urge to kill. Throughout dialogue, Arlecchino reveals that he killed Lorenzini Vanini's parents. He enjoyed killing them the most, not due to their roles in creating automated puppets or anything, but because he hated how happy they were. He would go on to become a serial killer, as the ergo placed into Arlecchino's puppet body was a human serial killer prior to their death. Anyway, this news didn't go down well, a puppet killing people, and this is where Leia came in. After she had left the Monad house for good, she fought Arlecchino and defeated him. She destroyed him to such an extent that he lost his arms and legs and was just a torso with ergo inside it. Leia's legend as the legendary Stalker was then solidified. The crime itself was covered up, with it being revealed that the people who were killed were the victims of a mugging. Arlecchino was not dead, but Simon had taken an interest in him for obvious reasons, because he was a puppet that genuinely believed that he was a human and that he was alive. Simon then made preparations for Arlecchino to be transported to the Alchemist's Isle via the Archon fleet, along with books and texts on awakening Ergo. The Alchemists on board were warned that Arlecchino was dangerous and that he was a serious threat to Krat, so he was locked in the brig. They planned to travel far enough away from the city of Krat to withdraw the Ergo from Arlecchino and dispose of the rest. Of course, prior to him being transported, the Alchemists had repaired him and fitted him with new limbs and had made him even more dangerous for some reason. Arlecchino had also learned that to truly embody the likeness of the human with the Ergo, one must have a close resemblance to the subject. Appearance is key. This is also a process that Geppetto would learn and would write about in the Madman's Journal, as he says that he's learned the Devil's Method. It's likely that this is the method of how he turned Romeo into a puppet. Some people in the Order weren't happy about Simon wanting to mess around with Arlecchino's Ergo, and they would petition Valentinus, informing him of Simon's experiments involving the murder puppet. Bringing true meaning to the term F around and find out, Arlecchino then attacked and killed all of the guards there and hatched a plan to head straight for the Monad charity house, which was nearby. It was potentially here that he learned of Leia's fondness of her remaining apprentice, Romeo, and then he went to Krat Zoo to begin his plan for revenge on Leia. As we know, Romeo then took the bait, went to the zoo, and the DLC Overture then played out. As for Vanini, after his parents' death, Vanini as a young man would try and gain access to the official records of the case, but he was always denied, and this was due to the Alchemist and the Workshop Union not wanting the details released to the public. After learning the truth through the DLC and fighting Arlecchino and obtaining Leia's Stalker outfit, standing before Arlecchino on the Isle of Alchemists, he eventually recognizes the outfit as the legendary Stalker. He mentions that he was set to complete his magnum opus but never got the chance. This maybe hints that in the original timeline, he'd actually defeated Leia on account of her weakness in suffering from the Petrification Disease, and he turned it into one of his masterpieces. Maybe. Since P defeated him before he could kill Leia, this magnum opus did not happen. Let's go back to the murder of Venini's parents. As a result of this murder, something had to be done. So the puppets had something that would be imprinted on them which people hoped would prevent this from happening again. This something was called the Grand Covenant, and it was designed to stop the puppets from becoming too human. It was essentially the puppet code, and it followed 4 simple laws. Number 1, all puppets must obey their creator's commands. Number 2, a puppet may not harm humans. 3, a puppet protects and serves humans and the city of Krat. And 4, a puppet cannot lie. But one day, something happened. The Grand Covenant failed. All across Krat, puppets became frenzied and started attacking their masters. No one was safe. The streets were filled with corpses very quickly. The police and military police didn't help, as they too became frenzied. The high price of complete puppet automation. In conversation with Geppetto, he states that he didn't build every puppet in Krat, so he's not surprised that some of them broke away from the Grand Covenant. As we know, Geppetto was indeed the one that started the puppet frenzy, but used Romeo to do so. He enacted a secret law, something we previously mentioned as Law 0, something he built into the Grand Covenant, which was that the creator's name is Geppetto. He did this for one purpose, to bring back Carlo. All he needed was a large amount of Ergo, and he'd be able to obtain this, well, through humans dying. Therefore, he ordered the puppets to slaughter every living person in the city. This was a great way for Geppetto to distract the Alchemists with something whilst he did what he needed to do. Remember, as mentioned, he didn't bind every single puppet to the Grand Covenant, so some remained free of his influence, but they would be bound to another, and that was Romeo, the king of puppets. With all the death going on in the city, Ergo levels were high, and this resulted in lots and lots of Ergo spores. But let's now unpack the Petrification Disease. As I mentioned just now, the humans being killed in the puppet frenzy resulted in the rampant spread of the Petrification Disease via Ergo spores in the air. It's not really explicitly explained just how long the puppet frenzy had been going on by the time that the game begins, but the fact remains that after Ergo was introduced to Krat, some miners who were breathing in Ergo spores were getting sick from a mysterious disease. As you'd imagine, and as we've already discussed, this revelation would be eye-opening to the Alchemists, and they would start plotting and experimenting, resulting in the creation of carcasses which, it seems, had Markiona at the centre of these experiments. Witnessing the effects of the Petrification Disease, the Alchemists believed that this disease was a good thing for them, an essential and necessary step in their pursuit of human evolution. So they would continue to experiment with it. The Alchemists would make a serum, the elixir. However, this was not a cure, not in the traditional sense anyway. With this elixir, the Alchemists injected patients who were suffering from the Petrification Disease. One experiment details a test subject 890. The majority of subjects died, becoming carcasses, but 890 did not. However, this subject did experience various side effects. Test subject 890 was actually someone we've previously mentioned, Sister Adriana, and Sister Adriana would become Laxasia the Complete. She would be described as the first whole being. Baptized by the elixir, the only imperfect thing about her was that her feelings for Simon remained. The elixir was then mass-produced. Letters would be written to the Alchemists by people who would thank the Alchemists for the golden medicine. One of these letters came from the coast where the elixir had been distributed, and this resulted in everyone there, save for a fisherman named Salau, ending up dead or becoming a carcass. But the details of how the disease spread throughout the village is all because of someone's greed. In the lighthouse, P can find another of the Krat mysteries. A tale tells of the lighthouse keeper. The lighthouse keeper, Columbo, was said to have been a greedy glutton, therefore he was called the portly keeper on account of his weight. He would extort money from captains coming into the harbour. Only once they paid him would he use the lighthouse to provide the ships with light. He built a secret room and filled it with treasures that he'd stolen from ships too. The legend says that he'd gotten so big as a result of eating the treasure. Anyway, Columbo vanished and the new lighthouse keeper resigned after he'd heard screaming inside the lighthouse, which was attributed to the ghost or spirit of Columbo. Inside a room in the lighthouse basement, P finds the body of Columbo. He'd become curious about what the Alchemists were up to, so he'd snatched a box of the elixir and sold it on the black market. His greed had led to the village quickly becoming overwhelmed. But Columbo had been dealt with a while before the village started to suffer. The Alchemists had found out about what he'd done and locked him in his secret treasure room. The screams from the Krat mystery of the lighthouse, they were the screams of Columbo, whose greed had cost not only himself, but the lives of the villagers too. Whilst at the coast, P can meet the previously mentioned Salau, and he's rather exhausted after a large catch. He asks P to retrieve a beer that he'd been saving for a special occasion, and he feels this is the time, so P can return to him later with the beer. P can also find a journal written by the small village's mayor, where he states that Salau went off fishing after the villagers had started to turn into monsters as he wanted to go fishing. The mayor states that everyone there in the village had already lost their minds, and they were insisting that they wanted to die. This is especially true of Salau's own wife. Salau's wife had died of the Petrification Disease after she'd been coughing up blood which was a bluish-green colour. Going into Salau's house, you can see his wife indeed became a carcass. But back to the Alchemist's experiments with the elixir. The elixir would control the condition, turning humans who were lucky enough, or unlucky enough, to survive the condition into superhuman mutants, essentially. This mutation is seen through champion Victor. Victor was once the world's strongest man and was even nicknamed the Hercules of Krat. However, at one point in his life, he lost all his strength. He was dying. He then turned to the Alchemists for their help. People were told that Victor had died, however. The Alchemists had actually exposed Victor to the Petrification Disease, and when they cured him of the disease, he became even stronger than before he became a mutant. He would then join the Alchemists, and he himself also took up a strong belief in evolution, with him being living proof of this remarkable advancement in science, and joined the Alchemists' search for immortality. Simon, of course, saw Victor's transformation as the potential for evolution. The first official outbreak of the Petrification Disease occurred at the Rose Estate. Sophia's diary from Overture, found in her room, paints a good picture of what happened. She states that the Petrification Disease has everyone frozen with fear. Valentinus had ordered quarantine measures and the charity house was shuttered. Lady Antonia would be there, and she would play piano in order to try and keep people there in the estate calm. They had no choice but to see out the winter. Then, as we saw, the Petrification Disease ravaged the place, with the quarantine obviously failing, and pretty much everyone there got infected. And it was then that the alchemist's loyal to Simon assaulted the estate in search of the arm of God, and also to purify it of the unbelievers. Symptoms of the disease were a change in the colour of the affected person's blood, and scales or bluish-green crystals would appear on the skin. Organ failure would follow soon after. The disease would eventually turn people to stone, freezing time and memory within the afflicted body. The disease would trap the Ergo of that person within the body, and Sophia says she discovered this and used Ergo to manipulate time. This disease then spread across the city like wildfire. Citizens would not receive the serum that the alchemists made. That wasn't until the recipe for the serum was stolen from the alchemists by someone named Dr. Clark Shaw. He had used the recipe to develop the doctor's cure-all, but this wasn't really a cure. Giving it to the people had a terrible outcome. They would die, or worse, they would become revolting carcasses, and these carcasses, as we saw in the game, were then spread all across the city. Also mentioned earlier, refugees were taken in at the cathedral and were helped there by the Atoned, but after they died, she felt immense guilt for it and would, hence her name, try to atone for what she felt was her fault by taking them there to the cathedral, as it was already overrun with carcasses. Unfortunately, the Petrification Disease, the Puppet Frenzy, and carcasses all link back to Ergo. Because of the integration of Ergo into every part of the city, the Petrification Disease was quite inevitably unavoidable. But let's now move on and discuss Stalkers. Alright, so what exactly are Stalkers? Essentially, they are groups of vigilantes that used to be armed guards for the privileged classes of Krat. However, they aren't exactly on the same page. There are two groups, or factions, of Stalkers, the Bastards and the Sweepers. The Bastards come from noble families. They were led by the charismatic Lumacchio, and were employed as guards for the alchemists in their workshop, and the motto of the Bastards was honour or nothing. Unable to find their meaning amongst the old families, they teamed up with the alchemists, foreseeing a better future for themselves. And we saw this through Lumacchio and his pursuit of immortality and power. He said before he died that he was forced to pick a side during the Alchemist Infighting, Simon or Valentinus, and he chose Simon. But that was kind of inevitable, really. Such was his lust for power. The Red Fox, Claudia, is another example of a bastard stalker, given that she comes from one of the old houses, Wolf. The Wolf family actually provided the alchemists funding to build their lab, along with the other families, but some of the families wanted to know more information about the labs. These were of course the Zelator labs underneath Hotel Krat. The Wolf family helped get rid of construction workers working in the relic of Trismegistus, as it became known just how much the mine and the minerals inside were worth. Anyhow, the other group were known as Sweepers, led by Veronique. The Sweepers come from the alleyways of Krat. They still guard the old families of Krat, serving in line with their motto, "We always repay what is owed." They felt like they'd been left behind after the rapid growth of Krat and its reliance on automation, as well as the alchemists effectively ruling Krat now instead of the old families. Sweepers would actually be given an important job, and that was to install contraptions known as stargazers all over the city. Stargazers were an invention of the Stalkers. The biggest stargazer we see in the game is the one in Hotel Krat, and the dials around it move as the player progresses further through the story. This indicates a time loop. The stargazers would also allow the ability to teleport to other active stargazers in the city too. During the outbreak of the Petrification Disease, the stargazers worked well, as they'd absorb Ergo spores from the air, creating safe zones in the city. So residents were safe, but only for a while, as at the time P is contacted by Sophia and awakened, we find that the stargazers have all been destroyed. Another thing about the stargazers is that due to Sophia being kept as a prisoner by Simon and hooked up to that machine, she was in such intense pain that she became mutated. Her soul split into many fragments, and due to this, she would be able to project herself all over Krat as a spectral form. However, she would only be visible to P, and no one else in the hotel is actually aware that she's there. She's using Ergo wavelengths to appear and speak with P. Also, due to this happening, she would be able to power various stargazers all over the city, and of course her power could be used by P, as she would draw upon the Ergo to strengthen him. When the puppet frenzy kicked off, the Stalkers were sent out to protect the people of Krat, and would battle the puppets, which is why the Stalkers have such a deep, burning hatred for the puppets, and often that rage is directed at P. In the game, we encounter a few more Stalkers such as the Survivor, the White Lady, and the Owl Doctor. The first we meet is the Mad Donkey, one of the sweepers who had been pursuing Geppetto, as he, amongst other Stalkers, believed that Geppetto was the man who was responsible for the puppet frenzy. But there was one particular event which proved fatal for a lot of Stalkers: the Battle of the Workshop Tower. Now, this was the location where Geppetto and the other skilled craftsmen worked. After arriving at the Workshop Tower, they had arrived to take out any puppets that were intent on attacking and killing people. However, massive shards of crowd would erupt from the ground and would result in the Workshop Tower collapsing. A lot of people died, and the incident would cause so many Stalkers to die that many considered the Stalkers completely wiped out. With there being no law enforcement, seeing as it was completely automated, and coupled with the fact that there were no Stalkers left to protect the people, Krat was basically doomed. This tragic incident at the Workshop Tower meant that the small number of Stalkers that did survive either went mad or were emotionally crippled afterwards. Others would turn to crime and extortion to get by, such as the Black Rabbit Brotherhood, who offered to protect surviving humans from the puppets. Well, until they could no longer pay. And many would ally themselves with the Alchemists, such as the Black Rabbit Brotherhood, Red Fox, and the Black Cat. So the overarching narrative of this title focuses on P and his humanity. Essentially, as just mentioned, the P organ in P's chest was imbued with Carlo's Ergo. Geppetto's idea was that P would gather all the Ergo needed, and slowly, Carlo's ego would awaken. After activating the puppet frenzy, Geppetto would place P inside a train car in the Krat Central Station. He would need to go there to activate P in order for him to fight all that opposed him, including Simon and the Alchemists and the puppet under the control of Romeo. And this, along with obtaining the Arm of God from Simon, would help him achieve his goals. Geppetto thought that he would get away with starting the puppet frenzy, but some humans alive still in the city suspected that he was responsible. As we mentioned in the previous section, one of these was the Mad Donkey, who had chased Geppetto all across the city of Krat, and therefore Geppetto wasn't able to reach P at the station. This is when Sophia sent a blue butterfly to awaken P, and he made his way to Hotel Krat. Approaching the hotel, P is confronted with a choice. In order to gain entry, he must lie and say that he's a human. Then, as we know, P kills the Mad Donkey and rescues Geppetto. Throughout the entire game, as mentioned in my rundown of the plot, P is confronted with a number of important choices in the game, which not only change the fate of certain NPCs, but that also significantly alter the journey that P goes on. These include decisions in relation to such questions asked by the Atoned, by the fake Alidoro, Julian the Gentleman, and many more. After these moments, if P tells the truth, as he is programmed to do, due to the Grand Covenant, nothing changes. But if he lies, he taps into what is a human trait. This is exactly what Geppetto was hoping for, as of course, he wanted to take the P organ from P and insert it into the nameless puppet. P can also listen to music, and this would change him too. As a result, strange things started to happen to him, such as his heart pounding and feeling a warmth. This results in him becoming more human, something that Sophia comments on when she sees him in Hotel Krat. She becomes confused as to how P could go beyond the limits of a puppet, that lying was changing him. Other things happen, such as P's hair not only growing but turning grey too. This is the result of Carlo's ego awakening inside him, and this is also seen through Polendina, Antonia's butler. Over time, as his Ergo changed and he developed an ego, he actually fell in love with Antonia. Partway through the game, it's revealed that Antonia is very sick with the Petrification Disease, and eventually scales appear on her face. Upon meeting Giangio at the cathedral and then at City Hall after defeating the Black Rabbit Brotherhood for the first time, P can obtain a cure for Antonia by giving Giangio the gold coin fruit. Polendina asks if it's possible for a puppet to love a human. Another choice for P in order to grow his humanity is whether or not to give the cure for Antonia to Polendina. If he does, then Polendina will give the cure to her. And it's not actually a cure for Antonia though, it more so relieves the pain she's in, and she's able to pass on peacefully and painlessly. In the original timeline, Antonia left a letter in which she stated that she thought P simply resembled Carlo. However, on affecting events through the Golden Stargazer, Antonia's letter that she leaves on her death is now different. It now features a green envelope and has a second page which talks about P being a force for good, and that fates change for the better. She mentions the massacre of the Rose Estate, and says that P is able to connect with people and bring them warmth. Another unresolved thread in this video that we need to sort out is Giangio. We first meet him outside the St. Frangelico Cathedral. He's slightly terrified at first, pleading with P not to kill him, with him thinking that P is part of the organization. He talks of the gold coin fruit and that he's been in pursuit of it as he's caught the Petrification Disease and needs to make a cure. The second time we meet him when leaving City Hall and heading back into Hotel Krat, he says that when he tried to pick the gold coin fruit off the tree, it burned his hand. He thought this was because of his being infected with the disease. The gold coin trees were also said to blossom when plague stalks the land, hence why one showed up at Hotel Krat. Truth is that according to Vidini's landmark guide, the hotel is one of Krat's most creepy and haunted buildings. It was initially a castle which was built by an aristocrat occultist, and was centered around a glowing and radiant tree, the gold coin tree. The castle was then destroyed in a fire. It's thought to connect to an unknown hell. The castle was then renovated in a Belle Epoque style, and its legend only enhanced its appeal. It would become an insane asylum, and after that, Hotel Krat, and the hotel would receive great reviews from guests. In terms of the gold coin trees, Sophia has a different explanation of how these trees came to be.
But the alchemists have tainted everything. The gold coin tree is a pathetic creature they created from the listeners. Like many of their creations, it's tragic, but useful. You can control Ergo with gold coin fruits. The sad tears of those who became trees. If they get the chance, the alchemists might force me to make such a tree for them. Or something even more tragic.
In the Zelator facility when P meets the tracker, he's looking at a gold coin tree that the alchemists were attempting to grow themselves. This is what the tracker says about it.
Take a look at this. This tree. What could it possibly be? It looks almost human-like. I dare not imagine what plans they have for it. But I'm certain this tree bears significance.
Now here's where it gets slightly messed up. In the drawing Rosora gives to P, it certainly looks like Camille could be pregnant. When she died in the accident, it's possible that they took her unborn child, which had listener abilities too, and turned it into the gold coin tree we see in the facility, but again, that's just a theory. It's pretty clear now that the tree they are growing is created from a listener, and the one in Hotel Krat certainly looks like a human from the side. But back to Giangio. There are two main theories about Giangio. Remember I mentioned that Simon was Valentinus' right-hand man? But it's thought that Valentinus actually had another one too. His name was Philippus Paracelsus. Giangio is Paracelsus. In that first meeting by the cathedral, he almost let slip that he's an alchemist. What's more, the man at the end of the game on the train is Paracelsus. Yep, this is the man that we've been seeing as the scared, stuttering Giangio. So what's good old Paracelsus been up to? Well, we find out in the game that Paracelsus, we'll call him that from here on out, was trying to make a cure for the Petrification Disease, or so we were led to believe. He's, like the other alchemists, in pursuit of the secret to eternal life. Such is his devotion to it that he has a special weapon, calling it the Ouroboros Eye. It's not clear when he joined the Alchemists, but he was the one who gifted them the Arm of God. It's possible that he infiltrated them whilst working for this other organization. As for the other theory, it's possible that he is the Grand Master of the Order that excommunicated Valentinus, although I don't have much else on this other than a hunch. As for the gold coin tree, it's possible that the tree had some sort of divine power that could actually sense the ill intentions of Paracelsus, which is why he needed P to pick it for him, offering wares in exchange for it. In his conversation with the woman on the phone, he talks about P becoming a brother. I guess the experiment in Krat was a success, as eternal life was found in the Ergo and allowed puppets to live as the Ergo once was, with human essence inside it. Which means that Paracelsus has been watching and observing P's journey throughout his adventures in Krat. He mentions that he's found a potential path to eternal life, that the arm of God, of course, is the key to this. Also in his final conversation on the train, he talks about having another plan, a key, and that of course involves the girl we see with the red shoes, Dorothy. As for where he's from, well, we don't really know. He joined the Alchemists at some point, sure, and it's not known how old he is, but one thing to note is that Paracelsus was a real-life figure, a doctor from the German Renaissance period. This Paracelsus was so renowned that he had a fairy tale written that was inspired by him called The Legend of Paracelsus. In it, Paracelsus is seeking the cure for various human illnesses and ailments and discovers a tree with a spirit trapped inside it. This could be what the gold coin fruit tree is. After the creation of the elixir, which resulted in the transformation of Sister Adriana into Laxasia the Complete, Paracelsus saw this as a massive step towards the evolution that his organization was striving towards. But we're likely going to have to wait to find out more. It seems that Paracelsus and his order are key to the narrative and the experiments that they're trying to carry out, and I guess a sequel set in the same universe will unravel more to the mystery. So finally, throughout the story we heard all these things about Alidoro that didn't really line up with the Alidoro that we saw in the game. He was almost like a completely different person. Alidoro used to be an alchemist. Growing disillusioned with what the devious alchemists were plotting and planning to do from the shadows, he would later join the sweepers and become a stalker, but he eventually learned more and more about the dark secrets of the alchemists. P meets Alidoro during the earlier timeline, and of course he's using the name The Tracker in order to protect someone dear to him, and that of course is Eugenie, the weaponsmith in the hotel. As we saw, he considered anyone who was an enemy of the alchemists to be an ally, and he could come to P's aid in the fight against the two-faced overseer. He would discover the treachery of Lumacchio, that he was Simon's attack dog per se. A large part of him learning about the alchemist's history would come through P in the DLC as P learned about those dark secrets. They were that the alchemists murdered Colonel Little and disappeared the taxidermists, using the zoo as a staging ground for the elixir, burying a human mine worker alive with a puppet inside a tunnel once they discovered the ancient ruins, and finally the lighthouse incident in which they killed the lighthouse keeper, Columbo, because he stole from them. Then Tracker decided to use his knowledge of this information.
Without you, the alchemist's secrets would have stayed locked away forever. More problems remain, of course. For all intents and purposes, Krat remains under the thumb of the alchemists. I know that what I'm doing is something that must be done, but I often feel like I'm fighting alone in meaningless battles. The enemy is great, and I am but one man. Will my efforts ultimately be in vain? Will the terrible truths I know ever be revealed to the people of Krat? They control the flow of information. A lone voice will always be dismissed. I can only hope that someone, somewhere, will be willing to hear the truth. I shall continue either way. I must. I still have someone to protect. And who knows, maybe all I need is one particular person. Perhaps that reporter known for publishing the truth. I believe his name is Medoro. I shall place my last hope in his hands.
Unfortunately for Medoro, the alchemists immediately acted upon the report by having Medoro suspended and the article banned. Alidoro was then essentially on the run because of what he knew. When the puppet frenzy had begun, Alidoro was watching the workshop tower when it collapsed. He saved Eugenie as she worked there, took her to Medoro, who was also a medic, and Alidoro lost a finger in the incident. Eugenie would then come to idolize Alidoro for saving her life, which was why she was so excited and thankful that P saved him, and that he was able to seek refuge at the hotel. But remember, this was the fake Alidoro. After saving Eugenie, Alidoro would go on to be a treasure hunter, but one that wanted to preserve items. He had a companion, a partner called Parrot, and although he looked up to Alidoro, he resented his outlook. So Parrot sold some items and Alidoro was furious. This ended up in a violent confrontation which Parrot killed Alidoro. Parrot then assumed the identity of Alidoro but would get into trouble, hence the wanted poster and him basically destroying Alidoro's reputation. One clue to this is that when P gave fake Alidoro the gloves that Eugenie had made for him, they didn't fit and he called them a mess. As for Medoro, at the height of the petrification outbreak, he had retreated into the Hermit's cave near to the barren swamp. He writes in his journal that the place was contaminated and that he was running out of water. He mentions a kind hermit having helped him. He mentions his friends, that Lumacchio was ill, Sophia was missing due to Simon taking her, Vanini had lost hope, and H, assumed to be Alidoro, is dead. In his final moments, Medoro believed that someone would unearth the truth. However, when affecting the previous timeline, there is a final memo added. The memo says that he has only one regret: his friend, Lumacchio. Medoro had learned of his friend Lumacchio's treachery when it came to the Alchemists. This is thanks to Alidoro, Tracker, and the information that P had revealed about what he'd done and how he'd been colluding alongside the Alchemists and about Lumacchio's death. Medoro would end up dying, and at the end of the cave, P can find a large carcass there which, upon defeating it, says, "Perhaps it's better to end this way." The carcass is either Medoro or the Hermit. But back to Alidoro. Parrot also took a decrypted letter from Alidoro meant for his sister. After Vanini deciphers it, it seems that Eugenie is actually real Alidoro's sister. This is why he was watching the workshop tower. He was trying to watch over his sister from afar. He couldn't introduce himself to her until the Alchemists were gone from Krat. This lines up with a remark from Parrot that the real Alidoro came from the country of the morning, as well as Eugenie. Examining the daylight-wreathed horn, it's described as a horn brought from the country of the morning, just further confirming that the tracker is Alidoro. Performing the deep bow gesture in front of Eugenie that is from her home country, she says that her heart hurts, which means that she feels a sadness. But that is now pretty much it for the complete story of Lies of P. Obviously there'll be some deeper lore in this game, but that is the main parts of the story and the world and characters in Krat. If you enjoyed this video, then please leave a like and subscribe if you aren't already. Leave a comment down below with your thoughts, but for now, take care, and I'll see you in the next one.